Hi, I'm Greg Corombos. My guest at this time is Carrie Severino. She's president of the Judicial Crisis Network and co-author of the #1 best-selling book, Justice on Trial, The Kavanaugh Confirmation and the Future of the Court. We want to get Carrie's thoughts on the media coverage of the sexual assault allegations made by Tara Reade against likely Democratic presidential nominee Joe Biden, especially compared to how the media covered the allegations against Supreme Court then nominee Brett Kavanaugh less than 2 years ago. And Carrie, thanks so much for being with us.
Great to be here.
Well, the initial reaction from most mainstream media was simply to ignore it. Then, I guess it was a couple of weeks ago now, the New York Times reported on it and concluded that while Reade did tell some other people about the incident at the time, other Biden staffers at the time deny anything happened or don't remember it. And the Times awkwardly concluded there's no other evidence of a pattern of conduct like this on Biden's part, except from all the women he allegedly made uncomfortable and spoke out at the beginning of his campaign. So how does that information and that coverage compare to what we saw initially from the media when it came to the allegations of Christine Blasey Ford against Brett Kavanaugh?
Well, yeah, it's interesting. This also started with a piece from The Intercept. And I remember when that came out, we said, oh, my goodness, this thing's coming out in The Intercept. That means T-minus 48 hours till complete meltdown, right? Which, of course, might be one thing for a Republican judicial nominee, but obviously is very different for the Democratic presumptive presidential nominee. With Kavanaugh, you had everyone on the left, every single politician, all of these senators could not come to a conclusion about these fast enough. They threw due process and the rule of law completely out the window. People, from the press and the politicians, they're trying everything they could to find every piece of additional information. They were hounding his friends, students, colleagues, classmates, trying to find, hey, is there anything else we can find to create a pattern here? You had people producing articles about all sorts of other stuff that had absolutely no even less corroboration, which is kind of less than zero, than the initial allegations came up with, just trying to find something. Here, there's this shocking lack of curiosity. I mean, remember, during Kavanaugh, we had a Senate investigation, you had an FBI investigation, and even that people were dismissing as, you're not taking this seriously enough. Now you have these same politicians, the very same ones, often saying, oh, well, there was a news article about it. I think that's pretty much open and shut. And some of those have become, are really striking, where you had people like Kamala Harris, who last year, when much less serious claims were being made about just about the uncomfortable touching, said, oh, I believe these women, this is really serious. And at that time, she was running against Biden, so she thought it really needed to be looked into. Now she's kind of hoping to be picked as his vice president. Suddenly, there's not so much urgency. She seems to have completely lost her voice in a sudden onset political laryngitis going on here.
We're talking with Carrie Severino of the Judicial Crisis Network. And Carrie, since the New York Times coverage, we've gotten another report of a contemporaneous account. A former neighbor of Reade says, yes, she told me about this at the time. Then we had the Larry King Live incident where, again, The Intercept had the transcript of it. The Media Research Center had the video to go along with it, showing that, at least according to Reade, that was her mother that called from San Luis Obispo, California in August of '93, the same time that Reade left Biden's office, and talked about what options someone has when they don't necessarily want to go to the media to deal with a prominent person. And the only thing we've known since then is that particular episode of Larry King Live is missing from the archives, although CNN claims it's not in control of those archives. So what do you make of these latest developments?
Yeah, well, I mean, look, I still do think we have to have due process for everyone. I don't think we obviously know enough to draw conclusions completely yet, but I'll say it's a whole lot more information and corroboration than we had for any of the allegations about Brett Kavanaugh. With Christine Blasey Ford, there's no evidence that they were ever even in the same room together. Here you have someone where it's absolutely uncontested. She worked for him. She had interactions with him. The only question remaining is whether, what went on there in terms of the level of harassment or even assault that may have gone on. But she has now several people who, not 20 years later, 30 years later, are saying they heard about it. But at the same time, I think that's something that under any of the standards Democrats were applying to Kavanaugh deserves a huge amount of attention. And suddenly, there's a real lack of interest. I'm hoping we're starting to see some more coverage of this, maybe partly being shamed into it by the number of people who are looking at it. I hope this pressure continues and that are people asking, there's town halls and women now like Hillary Clinton, who just endorsed Joe Biden the other day, not even commenting on it. There need to be people asking them at these town halls, what do you think about this? Do you think there's some tension between with the way you've talked about Me Too claims before and the fact that you're not even wanting to look into this? The utter lack of curiosity about trying to get to the bottom of what actually happened doesn't mean he's guilty or innocent. It's just, or how you take it, but let's at least find out what the facts are.
For the longest time, until basically the last 24 or 48 hours, Carrie, Biden has done plenty of interviews, never been asked about it. And Biden's surrogates, even as recently as this Sunday with the Sunday morning chat shows, not asked about it. That has changed recently. Kirsten Gillibrand, who was at the forefront of the Condemn Kavanaugh movement, now says that if you look at Joe Biden's track record, she believes Joe. She doesn't believe Tara Reade. Stacey Abrams, who's openly campaigning to be the vice president, saying that, yes, she should be heard. But the New York Times has concluded that her claim is not credible. The New York Times is now saying we concluded no such thing. We just explained what we were able to confirm and what we weren't able to confirm. We had no conclusion whatsoever. So what do you make of how the Biden campaign is reacting to this?
Well, one thing we know about the campaign is they actually actively lobbied the New York Times to change that piece. You mentioned the people being uncomfortable with the way he had touched them. That was in the piece originally, and they got them to remove it. So we know the campaign is taking it very seriously, although most of what they're doing is ignoring it. Joe Biden himself has not been willing to comment on it. And I do think it's frustrating to see some of these people who claim to be advocates for women on the one side and are happy to go after certain politicians, but when it comes to Joe Biden in particular, again, everyone you've mentioned, these are people who may stand to be on his vice presidential nominee. These are people who, in an election year, are I think very worried about what the implications are for their party's candidate. That's very worrisome. To me, it says that when you saw the outrage that was going on over the Kavanaugh nominations, and when this outrage comes up, it's clear it's very selective. It's very politically motivated. It's more political theater than someone who is truly responding to real principles on these issues.
Carrie, you said correctly just a moment ago, we don't have enough to draw any conclusions here. We need to let due process and a full investigation to play out. What's the right posture for the media right now? I mean, no reporter knows what happened or didn't happen in 1982 with Kavanaugh, if anything happened, or 1993 with Biden and Reade. So what's the responsible way for the media to handle a story like this?
Yeah, I think they should be looking into it. Clearly, there's a serious allegations here. And we have seen, as you pointed out, increasing issues of corroboration being brought up, including, as you pointed out, that Larry King tape, which is not the kind of thing that you could maybe fudge after the fact very easily. So I think they need to be looking into it. Again, I think they need to be asking the people who staked out very strong positions during the Kavanaugh hearing, if they now hold to them now that their preferred candidate is also in the same position. And, I would hope that we could do it in a way that is not jumping to conclusions on either side, but to spend so much time and print on it in one situation and then not looking into it enough on the other, I think is really worrisome. And I think in particular, just we need to hold the politicians accountable that have talked out of one side of their mouth when it was convenient and then have completely switched to the other perspective as soon as it is someone that they want to protect is implicated. They're free to make those political judgments, but I think they ought to be called on it when they do.
Carrie, is the media paying a great price on reputation as a result of this double standard, not only on this issue, I guess, but probably some others as well? Or is all these things such a partisan exercise now that, hey, if you didn't want Brett Kavanaugh on the court, you're okay with the coverage. And if you like Joe Biden, you're still okay with the coverage?
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, I do think there's a lot of concerns about the confidence that the American people has in the media. I think the way they treat these allegations is going to be a test of that. I'm encouraged to see that we're starting to get some coverage that was initially in some of these less of the mainstream sources that was covering these issues. Now we're starting to see it being looked at by some of the other big names, and I would hope that would continue. They want to be taken as a neutral sources. So I think this will be the test of, one of the many tests of how well are you going to do this? Are you going to be scrupulously treating this the same way? Obviously, I'm not saying the hysteria was the correct way to. This is the challenge. I mean, they were people that were jumping very far to conclusions that far outstripped any sense of the evidence in the Kavanaugh allegations, and that was a real problem. I think now the challenge is we don't just say, well, it's fine then because now you're doing it the correct way. I do think that the people who were incorrectly playing up those allegations last time need to be held to account.
Well, Carrie, I know I've already sold a ton of copies, but I encourage anyone who hasn't read it yet and wants the most thorough review of what happened with the Kavanaugh nomination back in 2018 to pick up a copy of Justice on Trial. Thank you very much for your time today, as always. We really appreciate it.
Thanks, Greg.
Carrie Severino, president of the Judicial Crisis Network, and again, co-author of Justice on Trial, the Kavanaugh Confirmation and the Future of the Court. I'm Greg Corombos reporting for Radio America.